and welcome to another episode of Lost Gotham TV. It is the first episode for a little while. There's been a lot going on. I'm going to cover that briefly, then I'm going to jump into some new material, some looking ahead at what we're going to be doing in the near future. So, to start out, you might be able to tell we're in a different location than we have ever been before for the show. A couple of years ago, the building that our studio was in sold and was closed down. We had to leave, and so we no longer have our studio. And seeing as I was getting done with my education and the business closed, we thought it was a great time for our family to move. So we moved from Bakersfield, California to Salem, Oregon, and we've been here for almost a year, and we're a lot happier here. The weather is a lot more like England, where I grew up. We had snow. My daughter got to see snow for the first time that she can remember in her life, and we're having a lot of fun here. We're still working on Spoof. Okay, so again, because of the move, because of just external things, because of life, we haven't been able to work on Spoof as much as we would have liked. We've had computer issues, money. When is money never an issue? But we are back on track. We are moving forward with Spoof, and hopefully 2019, we're gonna get it released. I don't want to put a more definitive time frame on it, because anything could happen. I just got done with a whole week of work where I worked every single day, and I didn't get a chance to work on anything, any personal projects. The most I was able to do was some reading each day. And that leads me into a lot of what we're going to be doing in the future, as well as finishing Spoof. I recently decided a couple of months ago that I was going to reread all of my favorite authors' books. And my favorite author is Richard Laymon. My book collection is right up here. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about Richard Laymon, my connection to him, tenuous as it is, and introduce the fact that I'm going to be releasing a series of videos reviewing each of his books and his short stories and anything I can get my hands on, really. I am a big fan. I'm not, I would say maybe like the biggest of fans. There are people out there who are bigger than me. I'm not claiming to be his biggest fan. But Richard Laymon, I discovered his books as a teenager. The first couple of his books that I picked up I got from market stalls, the equivalent of, in America we might call them swap meets, things like that. And yeah, I was a teenager. I was just really getting into reading. As a youth in England at the time, there were some other authors who I liked as well. Sean Hudson, James Herbert. Obviously Stephen King's big, but I wouldn't really call him a favorite. His books for me are more miss than hit. He has some good books, but he has a lot of misses too. Dean Koontz as well, and Dean Koontz and Richard Laymon were actually friends. And so I enjoy both Dean Koontz and Richard Laymon, but Richard Laymon is definitely my favorite. And so I discovered him in the early 90s, and it's always been kind of strange. Anyone that knows anything about him knows that he was an American author. He was born in Chicago, but he went to Willamette University in Oregon, where we are here, and then he also, I think, got his master's degree down in LA. So he spent a lot of time on the West Coast, of America. And even though he's an American author, he never, during his lifetime, he has passed on now, and that's part of the reason for making this video. Even though he was an American author, he never enjoyed the success in his home country that he did in other countries. He was always more popular in England particularly, but also Australia and I believe Germany, but just Europe in general. Many of his books have been translated into other languages, and he wrote over 30 novels. I think I'm safe in saying that, my memory. So some of them kind of push the boundaries of novel. We have one right here, Friday Night at the Beast House, that is kind of more of a novella, maybe. So my goal moving forward is to read all of his books, and I'm going out of my way to collect as many of them as I can. The rare, obscure copies of things, as well as his novels. He also has several anthologies, collections of short stories. He published many short stories in magazines. Some of them are a little hard to find, but I'll also be going, wherever I can. Here in Oregon, there's a great bookstore, or a chain of bookstores called Powell's up in Portland, and they have new and used books, and obviously Amazon, eBay. I'm going to places like Abe Books, and Cemetery Dance is a publishing company that published some of his books. And so I'm scouring the internet, and everywhere I go I'm looking to try to find his books. I've made some recent purchases that are still on their way, so they're not behind me yet, but they will be very soon. And so my interaction with Richard Laymon. As I said, as a teenager I found his books, and the first ones I read were One Rainy Night and Blood Games. Maybe Resurrection Dreams came soon after, but Blood Games and One Rainy Night. I can't remember which one I read first, but those were the first two. And I'll be talking about the individual books in individual videos, so I won't dwell on those. But by the time I met him, he had published several more books. And the way that I met him, full credit goes to my now wife, Angela. We weren't even really, we weren't dating at the time. We knew each other, we talked, we'd met up, but we weren't even really dating. And I introduced her to Richard Laymon. She enjoyed his writing, I enjoyed his writing, we enjoyed his writing together. And this was back in the earlier days of the internet. Or by that point it was actually it progressed a little bit. That was maybe 97, 98. And she was able, I don't know, through various chat boards or things, she got a hold of Richard Laymon's email, and she contacted him, and I was planning a trip to America. I still lived in London. I was going to visit America, and we were going to travel all across America, but that's a whole other story. And Angela contacted Richard Laymon, and through her charms as a person, she's an amazing, fearless person. And she spoke to him, she corresponded with him a little bit, and long story short, she arranged for us to go and meet Richard Laymon. We met him at a bookstore. It was in Burbank at the time. It moves around a lot, but the bookstore was Dark Delicacies, and we drove down there. My wife at that point had a slightly older, like an early 90s white Mustang. And we drove down there, and we parked in probably behind the building, and we went inside, and we were browsing around waiting for Richard Laymon, and Dick Laymon, people call him, his friends call him Dick. I never understood the whole Richard Dick thing. I would never want to be called Dick, but anyway. So Richard came in, and he came in with his family. He brought his wife Anne and his daughter Kelly, and we met him and we spoke with him, and he took us out to lunch. And alright guys, so I have to interrupt myself here for a second. I was sitting down editing the footage, and I realized that I missed kind of an important part of the story. I just mentioned that my wife drove a white Mustang, and I wasn't saying that because I'm a car guy or because I was bragging or anything. So we parked out the back, we went inside. Richard Laymon came in with his wife and family and his daughter, and spoke to Del Howison, the owner of Dark Delicacies, and he was talking to him, and he mentioned something about, hey, who has that car outside with the handcuffs hanging off of the rear view mirror? And Angela was kind of like half mortified kind of stuff. If you've read Laymon, it's a perfect kind of thing from a Laymon kind of thing to have handcuffs hanging in a car. And so that should have been part of the story before. Let's get back to it. So we sat down for 45 minutes, an hour, and we enjoyed. We went to a nearby Mexican restaurant, and I had like Mexican food for the first time, and it was an amazing experience for me. But I'd been in the country for maybe 24, 36 hours, something like that. Very little time. I was jet lagged, I was tongue-tied, I was starstruck. I get that way around celebrities. I probably talked about it before, and him to me was a celebrity. And so I don't know, I've always regretted how quiet I was and how much I never communicated to him. By that point, it was early in 99. I can tell you exactly, probably. See, I think I grabbed one of the right ones. Okay, so it was February 6th of 1999, and this is my wife's signed copy of A Writer's Tale, which is one of his books, which had not been out long at that point. And so February 6th, and we met with him and his wife and his daughter, and we had lunch, and we spoke a little, not as much as I would have liked. I couldn't get out the words I wanted to say to him. And anyway, so time moved on, and that was my experience with Richard Laymon. And time moved on, and in 2000, I moved to America. I got married to my now wife Angela. We got married, and we moved first to England, and then we moved back to America. And after moving back to America, there was a lot going on. The internet wasn't as omnipresent as it is today. It was a lot more well established, but a lot of places still using dial-up, stuff like that. The internet was not as omnipresent as it is today. And so for one reason or another, I don't subscribe to newsletters or things like that. As a horror fan and a reader, I've always been a little passive. I enjoy movies, I enjoy books, but I've never participated heavily in newsletters or things like that. So I didn't hear about Richard Laymon's passing until probably 2004, 2005, something like that, I think. And basically, today is February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2019. And Richard Laymon passed away on February 14th, 2001. Today is the 18th anniversary of his death. He had a sudden heart attack, and he died on Valentine's Day 2001. And I can feel myself getting a little choked up by this. 18 years later, 20 years after I met the man. I only met him, spoke to him once, never spoke to him again, but he has been speaking to me with his books for so many years before I met him and all the years since. And so I wanted to share some of my love with people, because again, even to this day, even though more of his books have been released in America, he's still not as popular as I think he deserves. He's a really fun author. I'll talk in the future videos about the specific things that I find fun about the individual books. Not all of them are winners. Not everyone can be. Yeah, again, he wrote over 30 books. Again, easily like maybe 30, 40 plus short stories. Plus he also wrote a series of smaller books called fastbacks. We're going to be having at least one episode looking at the fastback books that he wrote. Because he wrote maybe about 20, I want to say, about 20 of these little fastback books that were designed to help children, get into reading. And it sounds a little strange, the fact that this horror writer would have written these children's books. And, it's not that strange, just because authors write about these scary, mature adult topics doesn't mean that they aren't also parents themselves. You see this with actors a lot, where they make these very successful grown-up movies, and then as they mature and become parents themselves, they write books for children. And so it speaks to his range. He mostly wrote what is considered horror, but he himself didn't necessarily consider it horror. He considered himself more of a kind of a crime writer, and he just happened to write about incredibly horrible crimes, and he documented it right there in the blood and guts of things. And so he's always been considered a horror author, but he didn't always consider himself one. And I can definitely see from his point of view, many of these crimes and things. And so his books vary a lot. He wrote a couple of Western-based things. We'll talk about those in future videos. He even wrote a romance book. That one is incredibly hard to find. And if you're watching this and you're a Laymon fan, and you actually have a copy of A Stranger's Arms, please get in contact. It's one book I have not been able to find for sale anywhere at any kind of reasonable price. It is, I mean, the only kind of hint at it was about $1,000 for this book. That is the size of like a Harlequin romance. It's a very thin little book, and yeah, as much as I love Richard Laymon, I think things like books should be accessible to everyone, and the fact that someone is out there trying to sell something that originally sold for a couple of dollars, and I might spend $20, $30 on it. You know, that's not too bad of a price for a book, but $1,000 for something that was mass produced and sold in stores. We're not talking about a limited edition. It's not, you know, some of them might be signed, but it wasn't signed or lettered or numbered. It's just a regular book. Anyway, a little side trip there. I apologize. So anyway, we're about out of time. So be on the lookout if you're finding this video and you're just getting into Richard Laymon. Make sure to like and subscribe down below to the videos so that you can get alerted for when I release my future reviews of the books. So if I'm talking about a book that you haven't read yet and you want to find a little bit of information about it, you can. Alright, that's it for now. Until then, try not to kill each other. See you next time.